Earlier this weekend, I put out this tweet right here. Airborne Effectiveness needs to go. And fellas, just to be straight with you, I actually think this is a change that needs to be rolled back. It has hurt Destiny 2. And I know there's been development that's been put into this by our sandbox team at Bungie, by multiple developers, and I'm sure there's even some folks that are married up to this sandbox change. But after playing with it for months now, I can firmly say Airborne Effectiveness from its inception to where it is now is just bad. Now, for those that think that Bungie never does any wrong, understand they've made mistakes over the years. Bungie has actually walked back some of these changes after overwhelmingly negative player feedback. And that's what we're trying to avoid here. We're trying to avoid that point where literally everyone starts to leave Destiny. And believe me, fellas, it's happened in the past. So let me take you down memory lane real quick on some of the most egregious changes Bungie has ever made in the history of Destiny. Starting with February the 9th, 2016, update 2.1.1, the special ammo nerf in Destiny. You see, back in Destiny 1, Bungie came up with the idea of removing special ammo on spawn in 3v3 game modes to combat initial usage in the Crucible. Players would need to secure special ammo from actual crates, similar to that of heavy ammo. Now, there was normally a timer for this in things like Trials of Osiris. You had to wait for the ammo crates to even pop up, and by the time it even popped up, you were already in an engagement with the enemy. Now, ultimately, this actually shifted the meta. Things like Icebreaker, which was an exotic sniper rifle back in Destiny 1, which could generate special ammo, became the most used sniper rifle and probably the most used special weapon in all of Destiny 1. Sidearms also became meta, considering it circumnavigated those special ammo changes. No Land Beyond, which was a primary sniper rifle, that too saw a huge influx of usage, rivaling that of even Icebreaker. Now, shifting just a few months later, we also had April the 12th, 2016, which was the April update 2.2.0. Essentially, maximum reserve ammo for special weapons was reduced. Now, the final update for Destiny 1 was actually on February the 14th, 2017. Hotfix 2.5.0.2. Special ammo was reworked for now all game modes, not just 3v3. Players responded to the game with special ammo, but after death, all ammo was lost and you would have to pick it up from ammo crates to get more. This completely slashed special usage and completely wrecked Destiny. Luckily for Bungie though, Destiny 1 was already on its way out because Destiny 2 was launching later that year. So any change to the sandbox at that point was essentially swept under the rug, and some would even say that Bungie intentionally did this, and they definitely did, in order to prepare us for what was to come in Destiny 2, which by the way was no better. Destiny 2 launched with the double primary system. Special weapons were actually removed from the equation. Everything was relegated to the heavy ammo slot, and they really spun it in a way that did sound appealing. They would say, hey, you could rock a hand cannon with a scout rifle, an SMG with an auto rifle. Ultimately though, this almost killed the game. And I specifically remember Curse of Osiris. Everyone was actually thinking, is Bungie going to reverse these changes? Are we actually going to see a return to what we've been used to inside of Destiny 1? And then Curse of Osiris rolled out, and then suddenly, no, there was no change. Bungie was still sticking to their guns, literally primary guns, 2 of them, and so many people quit. I felt like I was one of the only content creators still playing Destiny at this point. And hell, at one point, we even considered quitting. Now, there were some developers responsible for pushing the double primary system. There were also the sandbox leads at the time, including Newski and Josh Hamrick, both of which left around the same time, March 2019. We're not really sure if this had anything to do with the double primary system or not, and I know it's an entire team that was actually developing this system, but they were definitely the leads at the time. It was a gamble, and it was a gamble that didn't pay off, unfortunately. And Bungie essentially spent the next entire year trying to win players back. Now, another big contributing reason to why Destiny 2's original sandbox felt so slow was because you were literally slow. They actually had to launch a go fast update. TTK values across the board were also much higher than what they were back inside of Destiny 1. And I know this actually gave more time for counterplay, but considering how lethal things were inside of Destiny 1, especially the launch of Destiny 1, it was a 9-day difference here in our sandboxes. Eventually though, Bungie realized that this change was catastrophic for Destiny's future, and the double primary system was actually removed with the launch of Forsaken. Granted, you could still rock double primaries, but they actually opened up way more options than we ever even experienced in Destiny 1. You could rock a shotgun in that first slot and in the second slot. Hell, you can rock a shotgun in all 3 slots. And with the combination of these sandbox changes, with the narrative that Forsaken brought, and a host of other things, Destiny survived. Now, a big contributing factor to why the game felt so stale back in year 1 of Destiny 2, and this was another idea Bungie married themselves up to, was static rolls. Yeah, guys, the launch of Destiny 2, everything was a static roll. There were no random rolls. None. All random rolls were removed from weapons with the launch of Destiny 2. And Bungie's excuse for this was that it made for a more balanced environment. It was easier to contain the meta when every single weapon had a specific static roll attached to it. This is like the opposite of looter shooter, right? More like a loot once shooter. That's all you had to do. This was also an equally bad change that, again, around Curse of Osiris, Bungie refused to change. Even more mind, Bungie refused to change. They were still married up to static roles. And it wasn't until Forsaken that all of this got reversed, and it took everybody quitting Destiny. Now, another terrible, and I mean terrible change that Bungie married themselves up to, and there was no way we could butter this one up, was Beyond Light 2020. Sunsetting was introduced. This is honestly one of the costliest mistakes Bungie has ever made. Everything from legendary weapons to armor, destinations, expansion content, these things that we have paid for were being sunset, as in they literally left the game. Now, I think there was a lot of devs that were actually over this. I know Luke Smith was very much a big part of this, and we understood the logic of why sunsetting existed. Deej put out multiple articles and tweets defending why sunsetting needed to happen. Luke Smith had tons of write-ups on the importance of sunsetting and how overall this would improve the health of the game, but that was not the case. Sunsetting was terrible, and since then, there was definitely some changes at Bungie internally and some shift in the overall leadership. I think Luke Smith definitely serves a purpose overseeing Destiny 2 and of course working at Bungie, and he's still a game director at Bungie, but he's definitely not the public eye of Destiny 2 anymore, especially after the IP defining comments. Now, Bungie announced in the Lightfall showcase that they would no longer be sunsetting expansions, and this means that seasonal content is still on the table to be shelved. Now, that may be fine considering that most of the activities given to us season to season are pretty forgettable. I mean, do we really want Psyop Battlegrounds to stay? However, the content added in those seasons needs to stay in some sort of way, especially as an avenue for players to relive the story and cutscenes from each season. Some sort of like timeline tab where essentially players can sift through media, maybe even replay certain missions. But the question does still remain, what about past expansions? We know Bungie is actually reprising old content because we're literally playing it, but are we ever going to get those old expansions back? Now, Bungie was very particular in their wording here. In the Lightfall showcase, the exact quote is, "We want the story, since we first commune with the darkness on the moon, to be fully playable from start to finish," which in layman's terms is Shadowkeep to final shape. So if we're committing to no more expansion sunsetting, then we need to go all the way and make Destiny 2 complete again. And if expansional content shouldn't be removed, then bring back what was taken from us. I know there's dev time and resources and little to no monetization in remaking that content, but honestly, guys, it's the right thing to do. How much better of a game would Destiny be if you could replay everything from the Red War all the way to the final shape? Again, sunsetting was an issue that Bungie married themselves up to, and it cost them. So much so that multiple times they've had to say, hey, we're not going to do it anymore. From our weapons to our expansions and content. Turns out, giving us stuff and then taking it away doesn't really work well in a looter shooter. Another issue that Bungie refused to budge on for quite some time, or at least publicly, was the anti-cheat. Bungie, in the beginning, especially when Trials of Osiris came back to us in Destiny 2, had no way to combat cheaters, which led to a long period of time of cheater heaven inside of PvP. I remember one day we got so fed up with it that we literally at the CEO of Bungie asking Pete to give us anti-cheats. And I know everybody was like, oh my God, why would you at the CEO of Bungie about anti-cheat? He's got better things to do. Bro, if my house was on fire, I would want to know about it. And Destiny 2's PvP was literally on fire with the amount of cheaters in there. BattleEye was finally introduced though to Destiny in update 3.3.0. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, BattleEye is not even good. It's a hell of a lot better than nothing. This significantly reduced the number of cheaters in game. Bungie has now become an industry leader against cheating companies, dishing out lawsuit after lawsuit against distributors, and I honestly love how aggressive Bungie is being against cheaters. Now, we had to beg to get here. It took so long to finally implement anti-cheat, but because Bungie has gone the extra mile here, they actually get a huge win. Granted, not all cheaters are gone, but it is significantly better than what it used to be. Now, another change that Bungie married themselves up to here recently, and they have not budged on, is the slide nerf. August 24th, 2021, update 3.3.0, Bungie nerfs sliding in Destiny. Now, this was obviously being targeted at movement exotics, stoppies, dune marchers, transversive steps, but instead of nerfing those exotics directly, Bungie said, hey, we're just gonna nerf sliding. Essentially, you get minus 20 stability while sliding, plus 15% shotgun pellet spread, and 1.5 times extra flinch. Now, considering how many of us actually slide in the game, this was kind of a problem, because it was very obvious to us that this was Bungie's first step of many steps that would nerf how we played the game, which brings us to Airborne Effectiveness. This is honestly the worst change to PvP in the last year, and arguably one of the worst changes in all of Destiny. I think there are definitely PvE players that don't notice this as much, but for a PvP player, you definitely notice this. It makes the game feel worse. Understand, one of the biggest selling points that Destiny has had over the years is the same thing that everyone says from any game they come from, and that the gunplay inside of Destiny is second to none. The feel of the game is wonderful, but Airborne Effectiveness has messed with that feel. Kuj actually dropped some comments about this, essentially stating that AE is a great example of over design, meaning it's a feature that the game would be better off not having. The game's baseline baseline aim assist and accuracy should be the same on the ground as it is in the air. That's it. Done. Congrats. You now have Halo, one of the most successful shooters ever. Think of all the additional sandbox work that could have happened instead of Airborne Effectiveness dev time. And listen, this isn't the first time Bungie has nerfed in-air gameplay. They've done this actually multiple times in the past. They definitely wanted us to stay on the ground. Here's the issue. Destiny players don't like to play like that. There are so many different terrain changes in the game. So many little times I use an ability that actually takes me to the air, or I find myself suspended just a few inches above the air, or maybe I'm just jumping up to a little bitty spot and suddenly my aim goes to crap. Bungie, we don't want to play like bots. We want to be able to move and be rewarded for our movement. And if you want to actually nerf movement exotics, then nerf them individually instead of making up this entirely new system that makes the game feel worse. And this is a very subjective thing, because if you don't play PvP much, then obviously Airborne Effectiveness doesn't feel like that big of a change. But for us, it is a big change. It's a big enough change that no longer does Destiny hold that title of being second to none in gunplay. Now, to continue with QJ's comments, he said linear fusion rifles could have been nerfed earlier. Lord of Wolves could have been nerfed earlier while this AE development time was going on. Adept weapons could have been made better for King's Fall and not make us wait until Lightfall. AE didn't just make these sandbox feel awful to play in, whether you were good or a bad player. AE poops on you all the same, but it also wasted 6 months of dev time that could have been spent on other needed things. Bungie's argument for Airborne Effectiveness is that it's too oppressive to players on the ground. However, the solution was then to make players on the ground too oppressive for players in the air. All you did was swap the sides and literally did the opposite of the Go Fast update. This is kind of like a Go Slow update or a Be a Bot Walker update. And considering changes that we've seen across the board for different archetypes of weapons, pulse rifles getting a buff, scout rifles got love last season, we've got further ranging maps being weighted more inside of Crucible. Listen, the meta was going to shift. We were shifting away from that hand cannon shotgun meta. Buff those weapon types that do require you to lane more. Do that before you go in there and nerf literally how weapons feel in the game for us and how they have felt for years. And what's even more egregious about this is that the Airborne Effectiveness update was supposed to affect special weapons the most. Turns out it's hurt primary weapons the most. That's what sucks. I literally jump up in the air to get away from a shotgun user to suddenly realize my gun is not landing shots, and that guy is able to close the gap on me even more effectively. I can tell you right now, guys, as much as I've complained about skill-based matchmaking, I can live with skill-based matchmaking. Matter of fact, Bungie, keep skill-based matchmaking. Keep it in all the playlists, but reverse Airborne Effectiveness, because this is a change that has removed one of the core experiences that Destiny 2 had to offer over any other shooter. I know there's some devs that have married themselves to Airborne Effectiveness, and to walk this back would essentially mean admitting defeat. All I'm saying is you can either cut your losses now and say, hey, this didn't work. We recognized it. We tried it out for a little bit, but we've walked it back. We've heard you loud and clear. Or you can keep it in the game and you can keep tuning it over and over again, and you can watch your PvP player base continue to bleed out. Now, I do want to give an example of a walk back from one of our sandbox leads, Chris Proctor. Xeonphage is a great example of this. It was actually nerfed in update 3.3.0 from 120 rounds per minute to 90 rounds per minute. It was poorly received. Xeonphage literally lost all usage, but the change was reverted in season 17. Update 4.1.0 actually allowed Xeonphage to shoot at 120 rounds per minute. Chris, this was one of the reasons we fell in love with you, man. You were willing to admit that a mistake was made here, and the change was subsequently reverted. Now, I'm not saying that Chris is responsible for Airborne Effectiveness. It takes a team of people to push out a change like this. What I am saying is that it's not good, and that's all I can say. I have no reason to be biased one way or the other, but I do put Airborne Effectiveness up there as damaging as the double primary system, as damaging as static rolls, as damaging as sunsetting. You removed a key component of Destiny's magic. Bungie, please correct this. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.